of The Glorious Mess. This is episode numero 5. We have done 5 episodes. The family has grown, and we are excited to finally welcome our first ever guest. Please welcome to the stage, Vanessa Lalonde.
Thank you.
Vanessa, I have a quick question before we let audiences know a bit more about you. But is Lalonde, it's French, right?
It is French. It is my husband's family name, so I am not French, but his family is. So it's pronounced very French if you say it that way, or else just Lalonde is fine.
Okay, amazing. I'm deeply connected to French culture now here in Quebec, so I'm always curious. But we're so excited. We're centering today's episode around this idea of imposter syndrome and the many roles we play. I think for myself, the more I get into acting, the more I realize I've actually acted my whole damn life. And I'm probably acting a little bit now. In lieu of the chaos that is our world. There is so much that is currently going on and continuing to go on. And social media has allowed us to have a closer, intimate relationship to all of that which is happening. But we also have to balance that in tandem with what's happening in our real worlds. And it becomes a scary place. And in a lot of ways, we are just getting by, and so we honor that, and I'm excited to dive into authenticity in this conversation. And so I don't know, Bronwyn, if you wanted to introduce Vanessa a little more formally.
Yes. Vanessa is someone that collided into my life when I was at the young age of 18, I think. So we have been working together and she's been an amazing mentor for me as well throughout the years. I would describe her as an embodied storyteller and somebody that is a great leader, is passionate about growing those up around her. And she is very into education as well, and constantly filling her own cup to pour into others and teach us all the amazing things that she's absorbing. And she's also a breathwork coach person. I don't know what you describe that as. She's the founder of Luminesque Dance. She is a woman of many hats. She is a mother, a friend, a sister. She's pretty cool.
And did you know this? Dangerous.
And
There's 3 Sages today. Thank God for Taylor balancing us out. But I don't know if you knew this, Bronwyn. We would have actually never first met if it wasn't for Vanessa. Because back in the day, Carla Catherwood introduced us in Toronto as part of Army of Sass. And then I moved back to Calgary. And I think you were running at the time the AOS kind of hybrid-y. And then I came out to Vancouver and I was like, I would love to teach. And so you brought me in to teach a workshop, which is where I first met Bronwyn.
Yeah, I was obsessed with RJ. I was very disappointed to hear that he was not interested in females. I thought he was so hot.
Yeah, that would be a letdown. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you had the hair going on.
Yeah.
Oh, the curly fro.
The curly fro at the top. Yeah. You showed up in your little heels and your muscle shirt with the little. I was like,
yeah, you would have been a sucker.
And Taylor, I used to really, I think there was a time in my life where I felt like I needed to, because my skin was so light, I needed to prove my Afro-indigeneity. So I would perm my hair to be like, yeah, I am. Look, I have curly hair.
Yeah.
It was a wild time.
Wild time, wild day and age. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the wonderful intro. That is,
for that.
Bronwyn is definitely, like, we joke that we're the longest relationship we've ever had.
Yeah.
We're both Sages and we both, you know.
But
yeah, it's been a very long time. And I think the 3 of us have always kind of circled around each other, and then kind of we're in the rooms together. And there's actually probably another handful of people that I know. I met Fiona because of you, RJ. So like there's a few other people in our circle that are very, big and still in our life. And all thanks to those little days of hanging out. I like it.
Those little micro relationships. And I framed this question just before we hit record, but like in terms of this theme that we're talking about today, the check-in question for everyone is like, what are some of the roles or masks? Maybe what's one mask you put on or play in your daily life or have played before?
Ooh. I'm like, just one? Let me just check in with
Yeah.
all 7 of my personalities. The
Which
first one
one?
that pops up for me is honestly the Bronwyn Joy mask. Like that's starting to get more blurred the older I get. But there was a time that it was totally, the brand that I created as an artist, as a teacher, as a dancer started to be how I lived every aspect of my life, which I didn't have the balance of one side or the other. And at the time when I first started out, I had this like, I wanted people to be intimidated by me. I wanted people for me to be this like hard exterior, mysterious, sex driven, like party girl, essentially. And then, you wake up after 6 years and I'm like, I'm fucking exhausted. So I definitely feel like the Bronwyn Joy brand has evolved. But there's still like, that's definitely a big mask that you create. I think it's also as artists too, if you don't go by your legal name as
Yeah.
well, it turns into like a whole different, your alter ego can all of a sudden not be an alter ego, and it's just what you're living in. And then you wake up and you're like, I feel like my inner child's dying.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely would say like when I'm in pain, I really downplay.
Ooh.
Like that's like the first one that I'll hide is like, and it's not always emotional, like even physical pain, like with some of my injuries, like I'll like pain is like the first one that I'll be like, nah, it's fine.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That's yeah, and knowing pushing away the pain to do whatever task I have to complete
Yeah,
while
that's a
shutting
big
down.
one.
Yeah. But mine is, I think I think someone called me out in one of my queer men's groups. It was this exercise. I think I told you all about it before, but basically in the group, everyone goes, you make a speech. You say, I am your king because, and then each person goes and says, you're not my king because, and then they go again and say, you are my king because. And so what happens is you get these fragments of truths because you can sense, that part where you're like, oh, that is true for me. And sometimes you say like, actually, that's not true for me. And it gives you this kind of bird's eye view of different things that might resonate. And so one of the things that the main coach and facilitator, Jeremy, who I've worked with for a long, long time, he was like, I don't know if you're ever serious. I feel like everything's a performance to you. And I realized, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, because I think so often I hide what I'm really feeling. And since I've been tapping into this, I realized that I'm really deeply sad and scared. And my sadness, it lives behind my eyes, and I intentionally make space and time to release that through listening to The Notebook, the musical soundtrack. And
I'll do it
different
every time.
form Scandal, which I never thought would be something that makes me cry. Like things just make me cry, and I'm really welcoming that space, Ben, and
I love that.
accepting my fear. But I didn't realize how much of this became inside. Even like, I don't know if you notice it, I'm curious, but is like my voice is deeper. So sometimes when I speak, I'm speaking up here, and I realize that's because I wasn't coming from my power, and I'm trying to be more mindful of like even slowing down ideas, because I'm so quick and like and so in that I think I'm finding my harmony. But yeah, so that's my mask. What about you,
Wow, I love
Vanessa?
that. I'm so excited that you're there and
Yeah.
you're
Thank
like
you.
accepting that. It's like beautiful to see. I've been waiting.
We've been
You've
on the
been there a
sidelines
while, I
waiting.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you guys really drop in quick, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
You taught us
let me
that.
just dive in.
Yeah. This is your doing, Vanessa.
Yeah.
Okay, you have shaped us. Not like you also haven't met me since I'm 18. Like,
Yeah.
I know. It's been a pleasure and an honor to watch y'all grow. But it's funny. Like I worked in this realm for so long of unmasking people and helping them kind of drop into a place where they feel like they can unmask. But there is always a mask, and masks are like, there's some positivity in them too, and really useful and effective ways of using that. But I know for me, like my biggest mask, because I'm pretty like authentic and I'm pretty transparent most of the time, but I find that my mask is like a get shit done mask. Like it's like, I can handle this, it's fine, I got this, I'm just gonna turn on and like finish whatever I need to do. And then when I turn off, it's like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
I didn't realize I was like holding that for so much and for so long. And you know, you're all involved in the industry of sprinting. So, you know, we sprint, and I sprint hard and I sprint holding a lot of things. And so I think that is like a mask that I wear, like, oh, I'm fine. I can handle all this. And
Mhm.
yeah, like it's like, can you do that? Yep. Can you fix that? Yep. You know,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
my yes mask.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
curious
Wow.
how transition kind of, there was a thing that one of my apps popped a notification to me about, like how we're constantly in a state of transition and our power comes back when we become aware of those transitions. And so I'm curious, we call it the glitter crash. I think, is that from your family, Bronwyn, directly? The
No,
glitter
that's from
crash?
Vanessa. That's
That's
from
from
Vanessa.
Oh,
It's an industry term. Yeah, it's an industry term. I would
okay,
say like
okay.
I think it started in like the burlesque world. Like I feel like there's the glitter crash was kind of like a burlesque term for after you do like a burlesque tour. Like when you're
Mhm.
really like your adrenaline spiking and you're doing tour and then all of a sudden you go back to being not in your burlesque name, like not your performer version of yourself, and you go back to
Mhm.
being your human normal
Yeah.
version of yourself, you know.
Mhm.
And so that's where that term comes from. But yeah, the glitter crash is something that we identify really well because we do sprints, and so as soon as like that adrenaline comes down, you can feel it. But I actually think that people experience the glitter crash like so much more often than they think that they do.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
when you're busy with anything, like you're busy with life, and even, you know, you go on a vacation and sometimes you come back and you're like, I feel like I need another vacation now to get
Yeah.
over the
Yeah.
things that I did on my vacation. It's still,
Mhm.
it's the same thing. It's basically your nervous system unwinding, and I like to
Mhm.
put some sparkle on it
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
so it doesn't
'Cause
feel
it
as
hurt.
bad.
And I love that. I love that word. I've always loved it. And I think sometimes I struggle. It's like there's a phrase like delayed processing. Has anyone ever heard of
Mm.
it? Like I sometimes
The
feel it's like a
worst. I'm terrible for that.
Yeah.
Like
right, and you
years
can feel that.
sometimes. Years
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And you see it sometimes, it comes up in my dreams, but after these moments where I'm like, especially after being in like an institution like McGill lately, I sit in these really big conversations of like how we've structured the world to be the mess that we try to regulate ourselves in. And I'm like, I come home and I just have to be like quiet and by myself, and I'm not good at that transition, is all I'm trying to
Yeah.
say.
I
It's
don't think
hard. It's a
as
hard
human
one.
beings, we're not designed to. You know, we're not
Mhm.
designed to be good at that. Like our nervous systems are not designed for the amount of stimulation that we live with nowadays.
Mhm.
So we have to kind of be kind to ourselves that like that's a really common and normal thing. Like we're not supposed to be able to bulk up and really, you know, yes, regulation is great, but you're not supposed to like firm up your nervous system so that doesn't happen. We're just supposed to help regulate that transition and then continue to decompress and integrate after. And like that's the thing that in our society of moving so quickly, that's the thing we forget is to plan for the crash and the decompression and the integration.
Yes.
You can't do big work and not have time to integrate, and that integration and that becomes delayed processing if we don't take that time, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
See you learning. We're like 20 minutes in. I'm like,
I
yes.
know. I was literally just like, wow, I need to look at my whole life now again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And you know what's so funny is I feel like, you know, you get told this over and over again. And then depending on where you are in your journey, it's when you are ready to like receive it enough to
yeah,
actually apply it. You
yeah.
know, there's always a piece of it that's like, yeah, I know. And then all of a sudden you
Or
get to where
even
you're
like,
like,
yeah, like
oh,
especially when you forget, you know, like it is the like, yeah, we know this and we've done it and we've been there, but then we get so caught up. And then all of a sudden it is that reminder, you're like, oh yeah, fuck.
And speaking of getting caught up, like we get caught up in labels and names so much in social media, gaslighting has, taken a form that suits the person speaking more than it does the actual act itself. And so in terms of imposter syndrome, Vanessa, I'm wondering like, how would you define it, or how have you come to understand it where it's at right now?
yeah. Okay, well, first of all, I want to preface because I am really big in education and I want to really shout out a mentor that I really learned a lot from in this world, and that's James Wedmore, and he's a business coach. And I feel like I have always innately understood the process of imposter syndrome, but he really encouraged me to understand how to break that down and then how to really help people understand that. And so a lot of the work that I'll talk about comes from that work, but basically imposter syndrome, it's like a behavioral health phenomenon. So a lot of times people think, is imposter syndrome like a mental illness? It's not, but it is very deeply ingrained in our mental body. So it is a phenomenon that's basically a self-doubt of your intellect, your skills, your accomplishments, and it's mostly seen around high achieving individuals. But I would say that what I'm interested in talking about in this conversation too is that I actually think imposter syndrome nowadays is showing up in so many more places than just our high achieving areas, which is usually, you know, work and school and skills, right?
Mhm.
And so it is like an internal psychological experience, but it is very much it's not something that you have to live with forever. It's not something that happens to you and you can't get rid of. It is actually just a phenomenon that happens in our human brain and the way that we process information. And you know what it comes down to is it just makes you have self-doubt. Like that's it. That's really what it comes down to is you're having self-doubt about an area of yourself that you feel in alignment with something else should be higher, better, more skilled, you know. And yes, we see this so much in work and stuff, but I think we also see imposter syndrome in like relationships, you know. I don't know if I'm good enough to be with this person, or I feel like I have too much of a past or a baggage to be with somebody who doesn't, or vice versa. Like you know, I'm coming into a relationship with someone who's totally different world and intellectually really different than me. And now I feel like I can't keep up, you know? So like we actually do see imposter syndrome all the time. I mean, as a mom, oh my God, every mom deals with this. Like, I'm not a good enough mom, you know, like there's 1,000 different ways that I'm supposed to do this. And it's like, it shows up actually so much in our life, but we identify it more clearly when it's attached to like a high achieving skill. And it's not perfectionism. That's the other thing I'll say. Perfectionism is different, but it is aligned with perfectionism. And neurodivergents are more susceptible to imposter syndrome as well, because we tend to we tend to spiral. We grab onto things and we hang on to them, and our brain continues to reprocess imposter syndrome over and over.
Do you see the discomfort? All three of us like
I
shifted
know.
there. Do you see that physical? For those of you listening, there was a lot of physical discomfort that was brought up by that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna close the laptop.
Called out.
I know, right?
And it's
but
interesting.
Normalizing it, you know, it's a normal thing. It is.
And do you think like, I'm just curious, like how, because it kind of, I've been starting to think about how I exist as an individual, and we talk about imposter syndrome as I, but then also the we, like that's also a part of like the structure of the world we live in, like this commodification of our bodies, I'm going to use the word rape in the context of like how capitalism and this world we live in, this white supremacist culture has like raped our bodies to actually never quite make it, always striving for something and never quite making it, never finding balance within. And so I really appreciate how you've brought in like, these other facets of imposter syndrome, because if a word becomes stable and stagnant, it doesn't get to reflect realities in the present. It becomes a reflection of something really in the past, right? And so your definition invites this opportunity to look at imposter syndrome at an individual level, but then also how that connects into the people around us and our relationships.
And it's still new, like we're still understanding it in a new way. Imposter syndrome is first coined in the 1970s, like by two female psychologists who were studying mental illnesses. And as they continued to study high achieving behavior and neurodivergency, which back then wasn't really titled correctly, but that is what they were studying. And so they were discovering, you know, what behaviorally were impacted by. And so when they define imposter syndrome, it was actually, this is a behavior that occurs because we are impacted by something. And we're impacted by society. We're impacted by capitalism. We're like, you know, I don't think I'm dressed cool enough. I need to go out and buy the next cool thing. I mean, that is literally a capitalistic structure that is designed to make you feel imposter syndrome if you're not doing the thing that it wants you to do. So it's not our fault.
Following trends.
Yeah.
Staying up to date, staying current, this need to like stay relevant, as if relevancy is the I guess monetary value of existing.
Yeah. And we're in
And
a time where we can be anything, right? Like you can go on the internet and learn anything, be anything. We change careers, we change relationships more than we ever have as a human society in history. And so you also always have this feeling like, if I'm allowed to do anything, if I'm capable of doing anything, shouldn't I be doing more? You know?
Mm.
And that is like
Ooh,
going
yes.
back to simplicity. Like, you will find that will never make you happy if that's how you're always feeling. Like, it's impossible to keep up with. So yeah, I
Wow.
hear about Taylor.
And I was thinking of it in terms of like situating it back to our relationship. And I don't know if you remember when I first moved to Vancouver, you were teaching at Harbor. And so when we think of how this presents as artists, right? One thing, there's two parts to this. Part one is, I remember you inviting me to sub your class was so important to me, because then that led to me becoming a faculty member at this high elite kind of facility within the city. And as well, being with like DaCosta Talent at the time was like I was in the in crowd, and yet in that I was so deeply dissatisfied with both of those experiences, because they weren't meeting my authentic needs. They were meeting the needs of me trying to prove myself to everyone. And so one thing that I think I've always appreciated about you is like, you were a part of both worlds. You were like, I want to make a show, so I'm just gonna make a fucking show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds
That's been
right.
that's been me since I was 7. My poor mother, like, like I was the kid who was like, I want that. I'm gonna go do it. Like,
Yeah.
get behind me, mom, because like that's what I'm doing. And that was that. So
Yeah.
And I think we all have fragments of that, like in our own little ways of like still just doing things, like not being the expert, knowing that like expert is maybe an ideal that you can reach towards, but at the same breath, it's also just an ongoing learning journey and battle, especially as we intersect that into, I think, the arts industry.
Yes.
absolutely.
So would you say imposter syndrome is a good or a bad thing?
One of my favorite questions. So I would rephrase that question to be, I love to just, my like life hack, I'll just share my life hack is to always rephrase good and bad with effective and ineffective. Because so many times what you're talking about is not actually a negative or positive thing. It's just, is it working for you or is it not? So is it good or bad? And is it, effective or ineffective? And the truth is that it's actually a great thing, but it's an ineffective thing. And so that is the like twist of imposter syndrome, because to have imposter syndrome means that you care. I mean, that is really the base level of imposter syndrome, especially in a high achieving role. So we're talking about like the industry, your career, your skills, you're going out into the world to offer something and you're wondering, am I qualified enough to do this? Like, it is a great thing that you are asking that, because any level of leadership requires that you care that much to ask the question. And yet imposter syndrome as a behavior is ineffective, because it's never going to effectively push you forward. It's going to always hold you back or keep you in a space of wondering, am I good enough? Am I qualified enough? And you're constantly in this kind of loop rather than moving forward and just getting better and having more experience. So yeah, so it's a unique one.
I like that. Hold on. I had something else to say.
You're writing it's like you're writing in your notebook, aren't you, right now, bro? You're like,
Like, I have so many things to ask, and I'm like, oh my God, my brain just like short circuited.
Yeah.
I really love some of the words that you're using, Vanessa. Like, this is something that we've talked about, a couple of times, but like each time I feel like you, I don't know, refine certain words, or just like the phrasing, like sometimes more and more pieces click, and it's kind of stirring up something in me of like, even if we have conversations, like we should keep having like even the same conversations, and like more and more information could even just come clicking into more people's brains. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how could you, from your perspective, Vanessa, like in terms of identifying, and like for folks who are listening, effective versus ineffective, like what are some potential scenarios, knowing that that's like a living idea too, that what is effective now and in this regard could be different for each individual, but what are some ideas around each side of that?
Yeah. So, well, I kind of will tackle like some of the ways that I help people through imposter syndrome, because it kind of ties into this. But first of all, it's really identifying where you are at as a person first. So like, it is a good thing to have imposter syndrome because it does mean that you care. And it means that you understand that there's a role that you are about to show up for that includes some form of authority or power. Most often people with imposter syndrome, it comes into play when they're working with other people. So when you're in a service of helping, or you're in leadership, or you're, even performing for other people, it is inviting other people into your realm that kind of creates this thought, am I good enough to share with these people, to educate these people, to hold space for these people? So, the first thing you want to do is identify like that. Okay, it's great that I care. Why do I care? It means that I'm showing up. It means that I have a real true desire to help people, or to perform well for people, or to make an emotion that feels good for people to happen, so that's great. What makes it ineffective though is then identifying for yourself, like, you are allowing, so how I kind of teach this is when you're in this, it means that you're allowing a perception of infinite possible outcome inform the choice that you make, versus allowing the possibility of your desired outcome to inform the choices you make. So when we get into imposter syndrome, we're looking forward, I'm going to do this, and you're all of a sudden worst case scenarioing to best case scenarioing, and you have like 5,000 different outcomes that could happen when you step forward and you participate in this thing that you're identifying for yourself. Am I an imposter in this world? And so it's so much self-work and like really digging in and asking these questions for yourself to figure it out. But the biggest thing that I say to like help refine that is stop looking at all those infinite possibilities and start looking at what's the thing you want to happen. I want to start my own workshop, and I want to teach this thing that I'm so passionate about because I think I have something really beautiful to say about it. And yes, no one could come, or people could come and hate it, or people could come and go and talk bad about it. And you start to think all these things, but going back to why do you want to do it? My desired outcome is I want to host this workshop. I want to teach this thing. I want to ignite passion in people. I want to help educate them so that they can get interested in what I'm interested in, and curate more interest in this and become better in different ways. And so, the truth is that like our desired outcome is usually a very positive, very effective thing. And it works out well for us and the people that it's involving. And so when we let our brain and anxiety and all the things go in the direction of, oh, all the awful things that could possibly happen, what will they think of me when I stand in front of a room and say this? You are letting that infinite possibility like take over your possible growth and progression and joy. You're letting something that doesn't exist because it's infinite to override something that is actually a true outcome of what is going to happen.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I wonder if I could follow that up, Vanessa, to tell us then what happens when we live from that why and we create something and nobody shows up and nobody engages. Because I don't know if you've ever shared, like, has there been what's a failed Vanessa project?
Damn. Yeah.
Actually, Bronwyn and I were in a great conversation yesterday, and I said, like, for most of my life, people kind of like always see me as very fearless, but it's not that I don't have fear, it's that I'm willing to change my mind. So if I do something and it doesn't work, I'm like, oh, okay, well, let me work on that. And I pivot. Like pivot is like the ultimate thing. I'm also like a ADHD Sagittarius manifesting generator. So like my whole personality is made up from being able to like, interesting, people didn't like that, okay, next. Like that's just who I am. So like I have that as like a personal ability.
Gift,
But I would
really.
say that like there are things that I've failed, there's things that I've done, but I'm so already on to the next thing that they're not impacting me in a way where I'm taking it personally and I'm thinking it'll never happen. In fact, I'm actually putting it in my arsenal of, okay, now I'm actually more qualified to teach this thing because I have actually failed at it. And now I know that there is something that doesn't work or that was received badly or didn't land. And now I can walk away. I can get better at that. I can come back. I'm actually even more of an expert because I failed. And that's like, it's a very particular way of thinking, but that's kind of how I get through it. But does it hurt? Yes. Do you hate when people judge you? Yes. Again, I have
And they'll judge
ADHD,
you.
I spiral. We all
For days.
like you can't stop thinking about the thing that person said, or like, why did that person leave my room in the middle of class, you know? Oh my God.
I was like, leave
How
your
many
room. I was
teachers have how many teachers have done that though? Like, you know, you're teaching a class and you have 25 people in the room and one person walks out and you cannot stop thinking about it for like 20 minutes. It's like you're taking away the experience of the other 24 people in the room because you can't stop thinking about like the judgment that might be coming. And then meanwhile, you walk out and you're like, oh, actually, they got sick and they had a phone call. They actually realized that they're injured and they can't be in this class and they didn't want to interrupt me. You know, like there's a million reasons, but
Yeah.
again,
Yep.
you get caught up thinking, why did they leave? Oh my God, they walked out in the middle of class. Why? That's when you get stuck in the loop.
And I just wrote a poem today about assumptions and the idea of like assumptions that we make about that person and then put into our minds as truth.
Yep.
But the reality is we don't actually know the truth. And so this actually intersects a bit into our like cancel culture kind of episodes that we've done before. And I know that Luminesque has like faced kind of issues within because you support such a marginalized group of folks. You've got marginalized women, people of color, queer people, trans people, all in this organization. So how do you navigate balance when like you're trying to bring community together through people who are both simultaneously healing and very vulnerable? Like, how do you find that balance? I'm curious.
I mean, trauma-informed training
Yeah.
first, you know,
Yeah.
decolonization work first, like understanding the perspective of as many perspectives as you can, you know, before
Mhm.
you're in a room with them is like number one. But I think the important thing to know when you're building an inclusive space is that like for example, Luminesque is open to everyone, but it's not for everyone. People will come and they'll have an experience there and it will either align with them or it won't. It'll bring contrast in a way of what they're loving and what they really need more of, or you know what, this actually isn't quite the thing that I thought it was. And
Mhm.
kind of removing the personalization of that and like remembering like human beings are so multifaceted, they're so complex. And so I just want to focusing on, I want to create a space that welcomes everyone from all these multifaceted, complex backgrounds and has space that they can be a part of. But I also am not going to take it personally if they're not ready to be there, or if the work is a little bit more emotional or triggering or whatever it is than it is for other people. Like there's just, I mean, again, we have like 500 students a term. So you're talking about such a vast amount of experiences. And some of them are going to be joyful and wonderful and they stay forever. And some of them are going to be jarring and overwhelming and they walk out and maybe they come back in a year when they're in a different place, you know? And so just removing the personalization is really important, but continuing to remember that just because like this particular person didn't want to be here doesn't mean that all people who are like that won't want to be here or shouldn't be here. And therefore I should close the door to them, you know? So I think that's just like the important piece is just staying aware of these different perceptions and trying to just open your doors to be available for all different types of people. But that doesn't mean that all types of people are going to end up in that room, you know?
Not letting the imposter syndrome get to you. The desired outcome is the desired outcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
love
and then
that.
staying with that, like, you know, you can't use failure as proof to not do it. Like, that's like, it's hard not to because you're like, well, failure should be the proof to not do it. It didn't work. But it's like, failure to me is not the proof to not do it. Failure to me is the proof that it either wasn't for the right people or it wasn't the right this or that, you know? And then learning, like, you got to go back and learn. Luminesque was called out for a lot of things that were off and not out in alignment. And it took a lot of work to be like, wait, why is that? Because I feel like in my soul, I'm in alignment with all these things. And then, you know, you go back and you unlearn and you relearn and you do the work and you're like, okay, yeah, I can totally look back on myself and see how other perceptions might have seen that. I also know my personal intention and I know what I do want and how do we make it better? How do we move forward and continue to curate that, you know?
Yep.
But
love
like, I talk like it's so easy, but I just want to be so clear, it is not.
It is not at
It
all.
takes work. Yeah, it takes work and time.
Yep. Yeah, Brahman, do you have it's like, yeah, it is hard.
Yeah. To kind of like wrap up this and tying back into the imposter syndrome, what would be like if you are experiencing imposter syndrome, what would be some questions to kind of like ask yourselves to combat that and get to a place where it can be used as a catalyst and not something that prevents you from doing the thing?
Totally. I mean, well, okay, when you get into imposter syndrome, you're basically asking the question, am I qualified? Like, am I qualified to do this? Obviously, when we're talking more personal things like relationships, maybe it doesn't feel that like formal, but inside, that's what you're asking. And then there's only a couple answers. So like either am I qualified? The answer is no, and I will find out and then be able to find a path to then qualify myself. Or
Yeah.
the answer is no, because I'm feeling imposter syndrome, but actually it's a yes. I'm just, the imposter syndrome is telling me it's no, you know? So like
Yeah.
those are the answers. But like no as a standalone answer does not exist as the answer, am I qualified? It is
Right.
because qualification belongs to us. So then the next question that you would ask is like, how do I know if I'm qualified? And so then you have to kind of ask yourself, what are the things that make, like when I, so for example, if I'm going to like start a workshop, I'm going to be a dance teacher. It's my like first time ever teaching, but I feel ready. I want to do it. I'm going to step into the space and run my own workshop. So the first thing I'd say is like for your qualification, like, how do I know if I'm qualified? Well, if you were to go to a dance workshop with someone, what would you expect or want from the leader in the room? And then like aligning that for yourself. So the thing about this is that it's going to be different for everybody. So some people might say, I don't think it requires going to, you know, a 200-hour training and having a BFA. And, you know, some people will be like, it's not, it doesn't require all that. It just requires somebody who's got like some style and something cool to teach me. And like, I'm going to have fun in their class and they're going to hold a safe space. Like that's maybe the bare minimum. But like, you know, maybe it's logical. Do they have insurance? Like, you know, how do they welcome the room correctly? Do I feel safe in the room? So what makes me feel safe? So you can kind of internalize like what makes me feel like someone's qualified when I'm the client
Yeah.
or whatever. But the note is that all criteria is valid because you might get somebody who also thinks, actually, I don't think that someone is qualified to be in that room unless they do have a certification. They've put in hours of experience. They've worked for free before they take someone's money, right? Like there's other people might have different qualifying. And so then you go back to your board. Do I have those things? Like that's
Right.
just it. Like, if that's what I expect from someone, do I have those things? Then I feel qualified. And if I don't have those things, then that's the marker for me. Like that's what I feel like I need to go and get in order to get rid of my imposter syndrome and feel really wonderful as I move forward. And so everybody is qualified. And that's the thing.
Which is
According
so
to whom?
Yeah, exactly. According to who? Like every
Yeah.
qualification is going to be different. It's so personal. And so for you, the imposter syndrome is in your body, in your mind. It's causing problems in your life. It's about you. So you need to decide only your qualification markers matter. Like that's it. If you say, I'm going to go on, I'm going to put out a workshop I've never taught before, but it's my first one. And somebody goes and they're like, oh, I didn't realize you were a beginner teacher. That's just not what I'm here for. That's because their qualifying marker is different,
isn't the same as yours. Yeah.
you know? But the
So
thing is that
interesting.
that doesn't limit, like there are people out there that will always have the same qualifying markers as you, where they just want what you believe you're capable of offering. And that's it. So imposter
So
syndrome is just a lie.
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
I love that. But it's so interesting because I remember the first time I heard about that. Doesn't, you know, everyone's like the qualifying thing. And I'm so passionate about like, you know, to me, there is always somebody out there. I'm like, ah, really? You think you're qualified? And it was just like to reframe that because again, it's like the expectations that you do put on yourself sometimes are so, for me anyway, are so high and so intense. And even soon as I meet that marker, then I'm instantly like, okay, check. Now my marker's here. And so I'm never actually like, wow, I've like done the thing and I'm qualified here now and like you know, enjoyed that. I'm constantly like, okay, good. Now I've checked that off. Now I need to be here. And so there's this constant like feeling of like dissatisfied I don't know, achievement. So to hear like, you know, you're qualified as much as you need to be qualified for the person that is meant to be in the room with you or around you, or it's very
And they
interesting.
change too, right? Like
Yeah.
you might start teaching one thing and then realize, I actually really respect this other mentor that I've been working with. And I'm curious, like, where they got their training, what kind of education they have. I'm going to follow that path. And then you start to adjust, maybe I'll teach a workshop in this because I have experience in it, but I won't teach a workshop in that until I have more training. So like your qualifications will change depending on what it is. And, for example, leading a room of dancers or, yoga clients or like some kind of physical movement requires a different level of qualification for most of us than just sitting around and talking a group, but also in very different ways. Like a support circle that's hosted over Zoom is not going to require a like physical thought of safety, but it requires a massive trauma informed thought of safety. So there's always going to be something. Sometimes they cross over and they're going to shift as you're shifting whatever the offering or whatever it is that you're a part of.
Sweet. I love this.
I love that.
Yeah.
And we also
Yeah.
have an amazing community of folks who also want to hear from you. And all of us here. I feel like we have some audience questions. No?
Yes, we do. Yeah. So from our audience question this week, we have somebody that has sent in, I've been feeling disconnected from my spirituality lately. How do you nurture your spiritual well-being and stay connected to your higher self? And then we open the floor. And if you have any thoughts, you may share them. Man, go for it. If you feel like we're like, Vanessa, what do you do?
I mean, this is like right up my alley. Well, okay, so this is one thing I'll say, because I work in embodiment, we talk a lot about the actual bodies and there is the spiritual body. And so a lot of the times when people are talking about like, I want to feel connected to my spirituality and my sense of higher self and like inner knowing, what they're actually saying is like they want to go inward, they want to discover what's going on with them. But the spiritual body in embodiment is actually activated by being in relation to other things. So, when I try to explain what the spiritual body is, the best way to say it is like, if you're, laying in the grass in the summer at night, you're looking up at all the stars and you're like, wow, I am just a tiny little ant on a rock floating in space. You all have a very clear understanding of where you are in comparison to this beauty around you. This happens in cohorts too. So like when you're working in a group with people, you start to notice more about yourself because you're seeing either contrast or connection with the people around you. So sometimes what's funny is when people get into their own heads about like, I want to feel more connected to my spirituality or myself, funny enough, that sometimes needs to be activated by being around more people or being involved in different things that you haven't been involved in a while, because that will give you like that, you start to learn your intuition a bit more. You start to know like what feels like a yes and what feels like a no, because you're more involved in things that are either really in alignment or really are not. And then when you start to follow the things that you're in alignment with, to me, that's where you connect with your spirituality. Like what lights you up, what makes you feel good, and then giving yourself the space to find that, to have fun with that.
Yeah. I know. I was like,
I don't have anything to add.
No
crumbs were left. No crumbs.
Nailed it. I was learning.
Yeah. It's so funny though, because you think of higher self and spiritual, like totally. I'm like, yeah, I must turn inward. I must like block out everything around me and like figure out what's going on. But yeah, the cohort thing was really interesting too, because that definitely is. You're like, oh, I'm definitely not that, or I am that, or like
you go to something, you're like, this is not for me.
Yeah, you're like, I wouldn't have thought of this at all.
Yeah. Or you see somebody, you're like, I do not think like you at all.
Or you have ADHD and you go to something and you're like, well, now I'm obsessed with this and I shall spend 3 years devoting my life to figuring out why I like this so much.
Yes. Taylor, do you want to read our second question?
Sure. I'm interested in exploring alternative healing modalities like energy work or crystal therapy. Have any of you tried these practices? And if so, what was your experience like?
Wow.
I'm just interjecting just because of my curiosity. Was just this moon ceremony where I'm curious what that was.
Okay.
I mean, I'm curious.
I couldn't tell you. Honestly, in usual Bronwyn fashion, I had just finished going on a bender And I was basically, you know, hitting the wall of like, oh my God, who am I? What am I doing? I'm clearly really fucking sad. And so then Vanessa just so happens to post in the alerts chat or something like going to this thing, oh, moon ceremony, like dancing out your end thing, blah, blah, blah. And I hung over in my bathtub. I'm like, sure, that maybe will cleanse my demon. Party girls.
When was this?
Ooh, it was before I had an autoimmune disorder,
think
so at
I-
least 3
I
years
was-
ago.
Maybe not even that long. I feel like, because I feel like I was pregnant. Wasn't I pregnant? So it would have been like 2 years, 2.5 years.
I don't were you? I don't know. You were kind of pregnant pretty
A
quick.
couple years past.
Yeah, yeah. It was probably it was at least 2 years ago for sure. A bit more than that, 2.5. You were just about to move, I think.
Yeah.
So, anyway, long story long, we go, and I've never been to anything like this. Vanessa's probably as like, for lack of a better term, as woohooey as I really kind of got involved. I trust her to the ends of the earth. So like I was like, okay, I'll go with Vanessa at least. Energetically will hold my hand through this experience. And one thing that I will say, I learned so much about myself. And actually this was before I'd kind of like it actually was kind of the tipping point for me to actually question like my binary, how I feel in my body, and do I really identify with being a woman? Is that actually something? It kind of brought all those feelings to the surface. And so anyway, you go in there, we pulled a tarot card at the beginning, I believe, or maybe it was at the end, I can't remember, and we sit in a mat, and then we had to introduce ourselves. And all I remember is you had to say like your full name, where you're somewhere where you were born, like your parents, or I don't know. It was like a long thing. And I realized I hadn't introduced myself as my legal name in probably like 6 years, like out loud.
Wow.
And so I was like, I'm Bronwyn Johnson Coy. And I could just feel my inner child being like, and then we drank some like, it was like hot chocolate, but it was
Like
what
a
was it?
cacao.
Cacao. I
Yeah.
swear to God, I thought, and in my head I was like, is this like that? What was that crazy ashwanga, whatever that thing that people go into? I don't know. I thought it was
Not
ashwanda.
ashwagandha.
Yeah.
No, that's a good one.
I know, but
what is
like
it
I was
called?
like, is this gonna be like this where I'm gonna just like go to a different dimension? And
Triple.
yeah, anyway, it was cool. She put on music this for like probably, and she just kind of kept, and at first I was really resistant, but everybody in that room was like in it. The only thing that made me the most uncomfortable is she kept talking about your womb space, and it was interesting because it was very woman, like female anatomy focused. And also because of working in Luminesque, it's so interesting when you start to create that more like inclusive languaging, when you get back into a super one gender space, it's like, this is, and it made feelings up for me too. I kept being like, I don't have a womb. Like what I don't relate to that. Like, so that was very interesting. But about halfway through, I got into it, and I swear my aunt was there. It was very spiritual experience. And then at some point there was like this chanting happening, and then I was sitting in the corner, and then all of a sudden I was like,
Why do I feel like you told me this?
I have, yes. And at some point I was like, oh my God, am I non-binary? Like am I so uncomfortable in my body because is it deeper than like, am I really sexual because I'm trying to like find, anyway, I had a whole awakening experience. It's very interesting. It's when I started going by they, she, because I was like, I'm definitely not just this for sure. But it kind of started me asking all those questions. And then at the end, I think then at the end we pulled a tarot card at the end too. And I just remember leaving and being like, I don't know what happened. There's a voice note in my phone that's about 7 minutes long, and it's me just at home trying to like recount all the thoughts I had. And that was the day I could finally fully like cut off my toxic ex too. I just came home and I was like, you know what? Nothing that's been happening has been working.
Yeah.
I am questioning it all. I have no idea.
Ineffective.
Yeah, and it was crazy because and the moon, it was like when we were getting really smoked out, so the moon was full and red, and I was like going into this weird place in East Van, and I was like, I have no idea what's gonna happen. But yeah, that was my experience. It was cool. It was definitely very healing. And then I dove into like all my therapy work after that. I kind of just was like, I allowed myself
Mhm.
to question like the stories I've been telling myself for the last 8 years in Vancouver and living in this like city girl persona. I was like, that's actually not authentic at all. Like nothing is. And like, who am I?
Mm.
Um, I also tangent also just did though sound healing for the first time last
Mm.
week.
Nice.
And I also I had a pretty sudden surgery this year as well around my womb actually, which is kind of
Yep.
funny. Yeah, see, foreshadowing. Anyway, and so once again, Vanessa was like, your energy's all fucked up because of anesthesia, essentially. And because I've been a mess actually for like the last 2 months. My brain has not been braining how it should. And when like, you're familiar with your own negative self-talk, and then all of a sudden
Mhm.
when I'm like, I don't know where these thoughts are, but they are not mine. Like I'm familiar to my own negative self-talk, what I think about myself, the things that come up when I am feeling anxious or the imposter syndrome is really loud. But the stuff that was coming up was like performing didn't make me feel better. I like did the nasty show and I actually felt so ashamed that I was even up there and like embarrassed. And I was like,
Mm.
this isn't me, man. Like something's going on. Anyway, sound healing, insane. I feeling the frequencies and the vibration of things channeling through your body. And my friend Maddie just got back from she learned it in Nepal, and so she's done her certification stuff, and she kind of was like, can I just help you? She's like, worst case, if it doesn't work, you take a nap. And I'm just banging sound around you. She's like, or it could be really cool. And so she focused on almost like clearing your chakras, and the difference where I could feel blocked, she put one like on my pelvis, and it almost felt painful because there was so much like energy there, and so it almost felt like shocks of electricity, and then it kind of moved out and then came back, and then I could really feel it moving through my body. And then my breathing changed completely. Almost felt like I was about to like hyperventilate. It sounds scary, but this is also like very nice. I'm very cute to know like where my body shifts. And then it was interesting. And then she would put another place somewhere else and it would feel very relaxing. I could feel the vibration, but it would slow my breathing. And so you could see where all the energy was like in some areas. And then by the end, I was so relaxed. And I will say, a lot of the modalities that I usually use take so much mental power, like even like breath work, like trying to stay in it, finding the breath, not have your thoughts go crazy, or talk therapy or hypnotherapy or movement. There's like so much of my brain power trying to like dive into that source. This was like I just had to lay there and drop just into feeling things into my body and feeling all this like on a cellular level, all the energy in this
Mm.
vessel was really cool. And then afterwards, though, I felt exhausted, but so my baseline was finally back. And then I did breath work the next day, and I think I was able to tap into that breath work so much easier because I felt like I had my whole circle of energy happening
Mhm.
versus like, anyway, that was a
Very
long, that's
granted.
going to be like a whole
Dude,
episode,
those
just my
chakras.
story.
Yeah, literally.
Like,
But yeah, crazy. So I'm in the phase where I will try anything, and I will definitely be doing sound therapy again. I don't know if I'll go to one of those dance group things with the cacao anytime soon.
Yeah.
But but the other shit I will do for sure. Try everything once, man. You never know what's
Yeah,
gonna
that's
work
what I
for you.
say.
Awesome. I totally agree. Did anyone else want to add some final thoughts to the mix before we say
Crystals?
goodbye for another episode?
Honestly, crystals, yeah. Like I fucking love crystals. I fucking love crystals so much. And one of my favorite things to do, and I try to do this at least once a month. I've definitely been slipping this whole year, but I will re-cleanse areas of my houses and I'll re-cleanse them differently. So like I love my bathroom. My bathroom is probably my favorite place in my entire house. So the energy that I try and put in, the crystals that I put in there, the like incense that I burn in there are very different that I will do for like my bedroom or like the
Mhm.
living room. And so that like even walking throughout my house, I'm always entering a different space. Or if I need something that I can locate a different space. Like my backyard has a different energy than my living room, which has a different energy in my kitchen. My kitchen is full of creativity. I don't know why, but it is. And so then I'll burn different incense and I'll put different crystals there for different things. So like I'll just have like random ass crystals all over the house. It's hilarious. I'm sure my mother will come home and be like, what the fuck? It's fine. There's like one by the foyer. I have like little like box full of crystals by like this, like they're just yeah.
Crystals pick you too. I feel like
Yes.
you go into those stores, sometimes you pick something up and you're like, I don't know why I need to take this, but I am.
But I will
Mhm.
literally, I'm sure my friends have seen like me, I literally will sit on the floor or wherever it is, and I will be like digging to find the ones that just find me, and I'll like hold handfuls and then like let them go, and like yeah.
I love being
Crystals, man.
gifted those kind of things too from people. Like when people are really thinking about you and then they choose something for you, I feel like it's always like
I
deeply
love giving crystals.
special. Yeah.
Mhm.
Nick
I
calls
was-
me
I'm
my
sure
rock.
Bronwyn knows. Bronwyn, I've literally given you how many fucking crystals everywhere I go. I'm like, I found a crystal here.
Yeah, I think most of my crystal collection is from Taylor, actually. Does Nick
Keep
call them
growing it.
rocks? Is that what you said? Nick calls
Yeah,
them.
he calls them my rocks. And then I get
Yes.
really annoyed. And then the other day he said something about like, move your rock or something. It was on the table. And my 5-year-old goes, Daddy, that's mommy's crystal.
Exactly.
He was so offended.
Yes,
that I would do
Amaya.
that. And I was like, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
You wish you had a
Mhm.
special rock, Nick.
Exactly.
Oh,
Maybe we just need to get Nick a rock. That's what it is. He's
Yeah.
feeling jealous because he doesn't have his own. We just
Yeah.
need to get him one that he can carry
We're gonna get him
around.
one. Let's do it.
Do you use yeah, you use crystals too, RJ, don't you? Yeah.
Oh yeah, my God.
yeah.
They're
Oh my
inside
God,
me right now.
Yeah.
I wait that yeah, sorry. I said they're inside me right now, but they're with me right now.
I was like,
I
hey
mean,
man,
say-
try anything
say-
once. There
Are
are
you
for your
doing
whole
it?
you can get crystal dildos.
Sex toys.
Sex
I
toys.
have a
Yes.
few of those things and they are fantastic, let me tell you.
See?
I mean, I'm not gonna
I
lie, they're
want
not as
one. Somebody
fantastic
gift
as a
me one.
battery operated tool, but you
Yeah.
know, they are
Yeah.
pretty fantastic for what they are.
That is
But
now
yeah,
how you that is now how you can connect to your higher power, folks.
Yes.
I
give
say
me
this
some
way-
crystals.
as maybe like a way to close out, and something I wanted to touch on in the first question, but I was so enamored with your response, Vanessa. But like when it comes to spirituality, there's a lot of decolonial indigenous artists talking about masturbation as a way to reclaim the body and regain intimacy to your ancestors and your relations and to land. So as a closing thought for this wonderful, beautiful Sag episode with our wonderful, phenomenal guest, Vanessa Lalonde. We appreciate you. Thank you for being an amazing part of each and every one of our journeys. And thank you for just
Yeah.
being a beautiful, glorious
Mess with
mother
us.
for us all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mama V.
Mama V, the
I feel like
original
people
mess.
always see me like I'm not a mess, and I'm like, you have no idea.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
nice to be here where I'm like, I can just be whatever I am today.
Yes. Yeah. You know
Yeah,
what? I
yeah.
think I will say, speaking of, yeah, I always like to almost think of you as the original Glorious. The amount of times that I've been in such a messy situation, and Vanessa's been the only person to be like, okay, tell me what's going on. I was like, I can't. And to the room, she'd be like, oh, I've done that. And she's like, listen, you just have to ask yourself. And then she would literally like, no shame, or, you know,
No
she
judgment.
or judgment, or she'll be like, you're, for lack of a better term, she's like, I should let you go right now, but I trust that you will return back to me. But this is your warning. How can I help you like not be as
Yeah.
messy? And now look how successful I am. So thanks, V. You can see
Oh.
through it, see through the chaos.
And
Love it.
for
Here
those of
for
you
it.
listening, don't forget to follow us on Instagram to get all the tidbits of knowledge and
Yes.
wisdom. The Only Glorious Mess on Instagram, or
Yeah.
send us messages if you have a scenario, something you're working through, or a topic that you're like, hey bitch, I want to learn about this shit. You tell us
Yeah.
and we might listen to you.
And
Ah.
actually, Vanessa, where can they follow you and find you?
Exactly.
And more about this imposter module coming somewhere.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, if you're in the Lower Mainland or the Vancouver Island area, like Luminesque is obviously where I put most of my energy, and we've got lots of different offerings from there that I'm sure you've talked about in the past, but so give that a follow if you haven't at Luminous Dance. But yeah, you can find me at Vanessa Lalonde _ and honestly, I'm about to embark on a new year for myself of mentorship. I'm calling it, this is my mentorship era.
Yes.
Because I've been a
Yes, we
mentor for a
need.
long time, but I'm really focusing in and taking all the things that I've been teaching and turning them into a new training for facilitators. So people who are space holders, I want to hold space for you. So that's going to be my next big thing. And we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome and decolonization and trauma-informed training and energy and all of it. Holistic embodiment is going to be great. So a lot of the things I've been talking about, you know, I'll be talking about more. So yeah, follow the space, and that'll be all through Polyglow Studios. And yeah, there'll be lots of different ways to connect. And I'd love to come back anytime if you all.
Yes, we'd love to have
Yeah.
you.
I'm
Oh,
sure you'll be
yes.
back.
Love it.
And
Oh, yes.
that's
Your
all, folks, for
resident
this.
Mama V.
Yes.
Stay well, everyone. We will see you and hear from you very, very soon.
Bye.
Bye.